I think he's the brightest, most wonderful person who has come across the starting line. I was introduced to him by a friend who's raising money for him. The friend's name is Dr. Khalid Al-Mansour from Texas.
Now we're at a juncture in history that unless the white masses really understand and the black masses really understand, there's going to be the largest bloodbath in America.
God cursed the black in the book of Genesis, and he had Noah do it for him. And he turned all the descendants of Ham black. And he said that they must serve white as punishment for the rest of their life.
He is the principal advisor to one of the world's richest men. He told me about Obama, wrote to me about him, and his introduction was, there's a young man that has applied to Harvard. I know that you have a few friends left there. Would you please write a letter in support of him?
So white people don't feel bad. Whatever you do to them, they deserve it. God wants you to do it. And that's when you cut off the nose, cut off the ears, take flesh out of their body. Don't worry, God wants you to do that.
And I wrote a letter in support of him to my friends at Harvard.
But the white Jews took over Judaism. And they are the ones who are saying, we want Jerusalem. We want Samaria. We want the Arab land. And they say, when you ask them, why do you want them? They say, God gave it to us. That's a lie. God gave you nothing.
The friend's name is Dr. Khalid Al-Mansour.
Beware of Obama. He's not what you think. They're trying to make him look like a Muslim. In the U.S., they try to, he may have been a Muslim at one point, but they want to hide in the U.S. But in the world, they want to say, oh, he's a Muslim. You should like him. I'm basically a writer. I'm a historian. I've written about terrorism in Central Europe. I've written about George Bush the Elder. My unauthorized biography of George Bush is, I think, a fairly well-known book on the internet. I've written about the world economic crisis, a book called Surviving the Cataclysm. I've done essays on history called Against Oligarchy, and then 9/11 Synthetic Terror Made in USA. And I have one book that's now out, Obama, the Postmodern Coup, The Making of a Manchurian Candidate. But I'm so alarmed by the phenomenon of Obama that I've written not one book this year, but two. There's a second book coming out, The Unauthorized Biography of Obama. In terms of US politics, my task is basically to call people's attention to the most dangerous covert operation that's going on at any given time. From 2001 to 2007, that was the entire 9/11 myth and the attempt to start wars, the Afghan war, the Iraq war, and for a time, the Iran war. Up until about the middle, say about July, August of 2007, that was a very real danger, so I focused on that. Now, that danger is changing. It has radically shifted. The greatest danger is now a covert operation around the candidacy of Obama. It's a kind of political coup d'etat going on in the United States with great danger for the world, because the policy represented by Obama is more aggressive, more militaristic, and generally speaking, more catastrophic than anything the neocons had. There's nothing good to say about McCain, just much worse things to say about Obama. Obama is a world tragedy in the making. This is a catastrophic situation if Obama becomes president. He is a puppet of the Trilateral Commission, and in particular of Zbigniew Brzezinski. And this is a clique of bankers. They ran the Carter administration. Many people today don't remember how disastrous the Carter administration was, but it was a very, very terrible time, economically as well as strategically. And now this same group has groomed another puppet, this time with more preparation, more indoctrination. So this is the moment where this clique of bankers decides to bring in a new face. And this time, not a right-winger, not a neocon, but a left-wing demagogue who promises hope and change, but actually represents policies that are qualitatively worse, qualitatively more destructive, and he can deliver Europe as pawns, as puppets, as expendable assets. Because the project of the next administration in the US, if it's Obama, is going to be not so much wars in the Middle East, but wars on a greater scale. Because Brzezinski says the center of power in the world is not Iran, it's Moscow and Beijing. And therefore, Brzezinski is determined to smash, essentially, Russia and China in the next period ahead in order to let the US, British world domination go on for another 100 years. Now, that's the project. That's more ambitious than any neocon, and it's more adventurous, and it's more dangerous. So people in Europe had better wake up that silly romantic illusion they have about Obama is going to be suicidal for them if they don't understand this. There are right-wingers who don't know how to attack Obama. I would attack Obama in the way that I've just said. He is a puppet of finance capital of the worst possible circles, of David Rockefeller, George Soros, and this group. And their project is extreme austerity, savage reductions in the standard of living, and the basically immiseration and impoverishment of the United States. In terms of foreign policy, it is this plan to have a global showdown with Russia and China. So for that, they need left cover. Now, the right-wingers don't know how to attack this. So they basically try to argue either that Obama is a communist, which I think is not accurate because he's a servant of finance capital. How could he be a communist? Or that he's a Muslim because his middle name is Hussein. He lived in Indonesia for a while, and he may indeed have considered himself a Muslim at some point in his life. I would, however, notice the two fathers that he had. He had a father, first of all, from Kenya, his biological father, who abandoned him, a guy called Barack Hussein Obama Sr., and then an Indonesian, a guy called Lolo Sotero. Both of them, it seems to me, were more devoted to Johnny Walker Black Label Scotch whiskey than they ever were to Islam. So I don't think the Muslim connection really makes any sense. But I would add one thing. If you want to become president of the United States, you're asking to get your finger on the thermonuclear button. There's a button that launches intercontinental ballistic missiles with H-bombs on them. From that point on, we, the public, want to know everything about Obama, everything. If he was a Muslim at some point, great, let's find out. And then everybody knows it. I think that's fine, but other people may not agree. The main thing, though, is that we've got to know everything about him. We've got to know, did he sign up for for selective service? Is he HIV positive? Does he have a criminal record? Is he bisexual? Does he smoke crack cocaine? These are all charges that have been made about him. The guy is a puppet of the worst circles of imperialism. In other words, he's interested in the same imperialist project carried out in a much more effective, and clever way, although ultimately in a more insane way. Let's just take the case of Iran. The neocon looks at Iran and says, somebody like McCain, right? He says, we want to bomb Iran. Brzezinski says, you're crazy. You can't do that. You're too weak. You're too bankrupt. You're too isolated. You're too hated. You know what you do with Iran, says Brzezinski? He says, I don't want Iran at war with the United States. I want Iran at war with Russia. Let's turn Iran into a tool, into a puppet, and play Iran against Russia. And Brzezinski said, I show you how to do that. I played Afghanistan against the Soviets, and I destroyed the Soviets. So if we look at Syria, the neocon looks at Syria and says, let's attack Syria. Brzezinski says, you're crazy, don't do that. Make a deal with Syria. There's a very important Russian naval base in a place called Tartus on the Mediterranean. And Brzezinski has just been in Iran. He went for the Rand Corporation a couple of months ago. The goal would be to get the Russians out of Tartus and try to turn Syria, if possible, against the Russians. So instead of having Muslims as being the target, the Muslims become cannon fodder for the project against Russia and China. Let's take Chinese Turkestan, right? There's a Muslim minority there, the Uyghurs, right? What's Brzezinski's plan for them? It's to have them fight and die in some kind of an insurrection. He's got an insurrection going in Tibet. The idea right now is forget about the target list that you've known. The target list is getting bigger. Let me add a couple of others to the target list. Let's take Sudan, Arab country, Arab League. Why is Sudan being targeted? What's the story with Darfur? Why are they doing that? Are they really concerned about a humanitarian emergency? No. They're concerned because 7% of the oil for China comes from Sudan. They're looking desperately for a pretext to go into Sudan, overthrow General Bashir, and cut off that oil going to Sudan. Now let's take the really big one. Up until now, everybody's been focused on Iran. And will the US attack Iran? Will the Israelis attack Iran? I say no, they won't. The US and the British will not. I can't exclude some Israeli crazy. That's possible. But I don't even believe in that. And I don't think it's likely. But there's an attack that's going on right now, and it's Pakistan. Pakistan is another Muslim country with 160 million people, and they have nuclear weapons, and they have the means to deliver them. Now, back last summer in Chicago, there was a debate among the Democratic candidates, and Obama came out and said, I want to have the unilateral US bombing of northwest Pakistan. Mrs. Clinton said, no, you don't want to do that. McCain said no. Even Bush said no. And now the US is doing what Obama demanded. The US is bombing northwest Pakistan. And indeed, the US and NATO troops and the Afghan troops are preparing to invade Pakistan across the Afghan border. Now, why are they doing that? This is the one part of the world where they still talk about bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, the war on terror, all of this idiotic mythology. Why are they doing it? They want to destroy the Pakistani central government. You probably saw the statement the other night from the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Gilani. He says, our national honor and sovereignty does not allow foreign troops to come into our country. And he's absolutely right. But the US and NATO are now going to do that under the new policy. The goal is to destroy Pakistan. You see Iraq now carved into 3 parts. Pakistan will be into 4 or 5 parts. It'll be Sindh, Pashtunistan, Baluchistan, Waziristan, and on and on. And that will never end. That's the goal. Now, why are they doing that? Not so much because it's an Islamic country, although that does figure in. Mainly because it's a potential ally of China. It's traditionally friendly to China, and under conditions of world crisis, Pakistan would tend to gravitate back towards China. So look at our hit list now. We've got not Iran on the hit list anymore. Iran is now a candidate to be played against Russia, but the hit list is now Sudan and Pakistan. So that's the change. And Obama is the one who demanded the attacks on Pakistan when everybody else said no. So McCain, ironically, was a better friend of the Muslims than Obama was, because McCain said, I talked to General Musharraf about these things. I don't do it unilaterally. And Obama said, no, it's got to be unilateral. That's the Brzezinski policy. That's what, of course, Obama has no idea Obama doesn't even know where Pakistan is. So he's spouting the line that Brzezinski gave him. Brzezinski's argument to the neocons is to say to the neocons, you're fools, you're bunglers, you're so obsessed with Israel and the Persian Gulf and Iraq and Iran that you've lost the big picture. And the real power in the world, of course, is Russia, China. Those are countries that are seriously capable of resisting the US and the British, and you've got to focus on them. And India, of course, would then become a big asset in that regard. Japan is another one. There's just been a summit of Japan and China. And the big question, of course, there was, would Japan become a staging area for the kinds of destabilizations of China that Brzezinski is planning? So the Japanese government, fortunately, has said no. The Japanese defense minister said that chaos in China would be the worst possible outcome for the interests of Japan. So it looks like Japan is saying no. Looks like Taiwan is saying no. They voted for the more reasonable party, the non-independence party that wants to have good relations with the mainland of China. The old KMT is now back in power. So everybody in the world is now in the process of choosing sides. Now, the point of having Obama is you've got the same old imperialism, and you're going to give it a facelift. You're going to give it cosmetic surgery. And one goal is to have that face for Africa. Let me just do Africa for a second. The goal in the case of Africa is to kick the Chinese out. It's to deprive China of the oil. We've seen it with Sudan. Oil, raw materials, minerals, and other things that they get from China. Ultimately, Brzezinski would like to isolate China, encircle it, and then reach a point where China would have nowhere to turn for oil except the Russian oil wells in eastern Siberia. In other words, the end product of this entire policy is to play China against Russia and get rid of both of them, destroy both, and then the US and the British can settle in for another 100 years of world domination. Now, there's also an angle for Europe, though. The idea, of course, is that with Bush or McCain, the US is disliked, the policy is discredited, nobody wants to go along with this. The demagogy of Obama is that with this new face, somehow you can now get throngs and throngs of young dupes and individuals who have really no clue what they're doing to support this stuff. In other words, Obama wants Europe as a tool against Russia. And I would urge you, don't go there. Realize that that is what you're being offered, and don't do it. And if Obama comes from London to Paris to Berlin, it would be important for people to go out there and say, well, or not to go out there, say, we don't want any part of this. This is the policy that Brzezinski's been following. NATO expansion, far beyond the lines that were agreed on back in 1990 and 1991. You may remember there was an agreement that said the US would not even go into East Germany. And now we're all the way to Lithuania and Georgia and Ukraine and all these places. Now, what we're headed into is a Polish missile crisis. You had the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. That was bad enough. The Polish missile crisis is going to be worse because there are elements in Poland, there are elements in the Czech Republic. There's even an element in Lithuania. There's a forward tentacle of that system in Lithuania, right on Russia's doorstep. What is the goal of that? It is the ability to have a first strike, surprise attack, to destroy the Russian nuclear deterrent on the ground, and then the second strike launched by the Russians can somehow be suppressed by these missiles in Poland. So it is a step towards World War III. And it is Brzezinski, another angle that goes with it, the independence of Kosovo, under what amounts to a criminal organization, in my view, is another one of Brzezinski's projects. And this, of course, is designed as an affront to Russia. Today we have the indictment of the capture of this guy, Karadzic. Karadzic is a very bad guy, but why now? And what's the goal? This is designed to further inflame relations with Russia, even as a possibility of war between Russia and Georgia comes on the horizon. So this is now a full strategic envelopment. This is not just Iraq and the Persian Gulf. This is now a worldwide strategy. And again, the mind of it is Brzezinski. This is already being implemented in the United States. I better point that out too. You think you see Bush and Cheney as the leaders of the United States. They're not. They're gone. They're finished. Not even lame ducks. They're the janitors of the White House, the groundskeepers. They're there for show. They're just figureheads to make people think that normal stuff is still going on. Power has now passed into something called the Principals Committee. And it's just the leading government ministers, the secretaries of the main executive departments, an interministerial committee, if you will. Rice of the State Department, Gates of the Pentagon, Paulson of the Treasury. Admiral Mullen of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is a very important guy also in this. But these people are bureaucrats. They don't really have policies. The policies that they're carrying out are from Brzezinski, and that is no attack on Iran, make a deal with North Korea. And Cheney was horrified by that. Cheney almost had his 99th heart attack over the deal with North Korea, and this was done by Rice. But attack Pakistan, get ready to attack Sudan, get ready to attack Zimbabwe, get ready to attack Burma. In many cases, it's done under humanitarian considerations. It's not bin Laden, Al-Qaeda. Pakistan is the exception. But in most of these places, like Sudan or Zimbabwe, it's human rights. Goes back to Carter, right? Goes back to the time when Brzezinski was running the National Security Council. So what you've got is a shift. Instead of having imperialism with right-wing slogans, you've got imperialism with left-wing slogans. But the content is either the same or, I would argue, worse, because the neocons had one benefit. They picked on relatively defenseless states. In other words, everybody knew there was no way that Iraq could strike the United States directly. It's not even easy to see how Iran could strike the US directly. But when you get to Russia and China, that looks very different, doesn't it? Because now there are intercontinental ballistic missiles and H-bombs, and they can defend themselves, and they will. So the neocon game is over, but you can see that at least they had some limits to their insanity, whereas with Brzezinski, the insanity is essentially unlimited.
This is from the point of view of the Black Revolution. Since the inception of the so-called Black Revolution in the 60s, we have had false leaders, and the movements, the true movements, such as the Panthers, were infiltrated by COINTELPRO. So here, if we look at the man Khalid Abdullah Tariq al-Mansur, who was a financier of Barack Obama, partly responsible for him getting his education that primed him for politics. If one would do research and look into that, one would think that there's a revolution afoot. But Dr. Khalid Abdullah Tariq al-Mansur wrote a book called Betrayal by Any Other Name, which systematically answers the controversial question of who truly speaks for the African Americans and Hispanic Americans. The book has over 800 attention-riveted pages beginning in Africa before and through the terror of slavery, civil rights construction, civil rights and black nationalism. A similar treatment is presented in the evolution of the Hispanic leadership, couched into a little-known history facts about the Aztecs, the Maya civilization, and all this. And he brings out the wrongdoings of a lot of black leaders, such as Jesse Jackson, and he brings out some good about a lot of things. He really shows exactly what's going on in the black community, how everything went down. But then you look at the hypocrisy of it all, a book that brought out the truth. On the cover of the page, it's shaped like a pentagon. So this man brought out the truth, and then he himself, you have to think about it, if he know who Obama is, and we note that he is the financial advisor of one of the most powerful men in Saudi Arabia, and we all know how the Obama administration turned out. So we see there that there is something wrong. There's been this facade of black leadership. So al-Masir falls into that boule type thing. So there's a front there. So we're going to look deeper into what is happening upon the seemingly or the appearing exit of Barack Obama, and we would call this part the Turner Diaries. Okay, Trump won the election against Hillary Clinton, which appeared impossible to the American people, basically because of her false liberalism. The masses wanted to see a first woman president. Even Stevie Wonder was caught up in that. He campaigned for Hillary Clinton. So we see a great betrayal, appearing of a great betrayal. Is it true that Stevie Wonder has betrayed the message in his music? So Trump won the election against Hillary Clinton, caused a whole lot of uprising in the streets, and we must look at the pogroms in the streets, which appeared to, it was just impossible, so the American people thought, as I said, basically because of her appearing liberalism. The masses want to see the first woman president, which would connect with Obama's already corruption of same-sex marriage, etc., which points out the fact that America is still basically a racist state, where the black populace has no clue of how politics work. They cannot see that Obama is the puppet of choice for the puppet masters. The essence of all this is determined by an occult force of astrology and astronomy, which is the allegory, metaphor, and simile of the holy scripts of the world, which overrides the evil of Earth's puppet masters. Many thought since the Clintons were wealthy and Bill understood economics, and low-level businessmen bought into the false hope and could not see the strategy of Donald Trump, which is multi-level, just like the holy scripts are multi-level. Trump, in many ways, is a monkey wrench thrown into the machine, giving the masses a moment to think. But this victory, according to my analytical model, could be short-lived. This template shows a scheme for social unrest, etc. If something were to happen to Trump before January 20th, 2017, the KKK faction of this country will rise up and attack the ignorant black populace, as they have been preparing for years. Okay, we must consult the infamous underground publication called the Turner Diaries. Research the Turner Diaries, and you will see that the survivalists and the militia groups and the rednecks and the KKK have been training and preparing for this coming revolt that's being ushered in for over 30 years now. The Turner Diaries. We must also consult the oracle of the puppet masters of the false flag movement, Black Lives Matter, which is a Manchurian group. We have seen the staging grounds for this revolution by the short sprats of pogroms with the police shootings of black people in retrospect 2016, the Dallas shootings, etc. We must study the Code movie, Birth of a Nation, under the disguise of Nat Turner's Revolt, which was a code word for the silent KKK movie by the same name, titled Birth of a Nation. So we see the writer of the Nat Turner movie is an agent for the puppet masters also, one with the Black Lives Matter movement. We must take a journalistic view of the president to be Donald Trump, who has historic ties to the invisible empire, whose slogan "Make America Great Again," a slogan his followers know means to take America back to where it once was, when the invisible empire kept the darkies in their place. In essence, Trump is just an actor upon the same stage as Obama, used to bring about the desired effect of the social engineers. This is a very complex operation, I must say, which also concludes the all of a sudden Black Power Awards that all of a sudden appeared in this month, Black Power Awards. How absurd. We must now go back to the year 1981, to the Atlanta child murders, which has been found to be the result of the invisible empire, not the work of the black man who was the scapegoat and still in prison. In other words, what Obama has been used for, and Trump and Hillary to boot, spells anarchy. What we are witnessing is the birth of a new nation, or new world order, the resurrection of the invisible empire, as the KKK never died. It went underground and became more powerful by overthrowing the government, using in the end black people to help them. So we see the holy drama to be about racism, the white race against the black race, white supremacy. This mindset spans the globe, where the original race has been enslaved by the white race of all nations. And if we look closely, we can really see that. For instance, there are the white Arabs, the Saudi families that have taken over Saudi Arabia. How and the black Muslims and the black Arabs are not seen in the forefront. Like in India, you have the white East Indians, the Aryans, and Jerusalem, Israel. You see the white synagogue of Satan, the so-called Israelites. Here in America, Europe, it's everywhere. So it's white supremacy. So this is the gist of the one world order, which has used the black man himself against each other. As I say, we look back at the Atlanta child murders, and I believe that it goes deeper than even the Ku Klux Klan being behind the murders. We have heard back in the days that there was something else that they were taking from the black boys. So this thing runs real deep. But what we have to count on ourselves is divine intervention. We have to look at the script, the holy script that was written, look at the wisdom on the walls of the Great Pyramid, and look to our great ancestors. And as the revolt in Haiti was, we use our ancestral wisdom, our ancestral power. It is not for us to go to the street and fighting, joining the pogroms of the scapegoats and of the sheeple that's out in the streets. That's what they want us to do. So we must deal with this scientifically. This is journalism that's not normally used in the black community. This is an analytical point of view. All the different elements have been brought into the laboratory, and we have put them together in collage form, that you get the total picture of what's taking place here. So we do understand that Trump was the Trump card, and it's also divine and it's also evil at the same time. We know that Trump has ties with the Ku Klux Klan. His grandparents were Kluxers, and his father was a member of the Klan and all that type thing. And his grandfather was a pimp and all this. So we see all this Sodom and Gomorrah going on. So we can see the total picture, you know. And if we have people out there in the streets now fighting because Trump won and they want Hillary, so we see we have a very perverted mindset here in America. Hillary was, everybody knows that there's been a plethora of murders and crime behind the Clintons, how they did Haiti, and it's just in the news every day. And we could see her in the news sick, like a bobblehead doll on a 1967 Chevy, just bobbling her head. She was sick. Everybody saw that. But yet and still, there are sick people out there that wanted her to be president. And so when Trump came in, which was like a diversion, it was actually a paradigm shift on one level. It's multi-level. It's total madness. It's chaos. But it was a paradigm shift to let us know that big money the already established media, the already established scenario has been monkey wrenched into the machine. So we see this thing from multi-levels, just like the script is multi-level, allegories, metaphors, and similes. But our black journalists don't look at it from that perspective. They take everything literally, and our media is, we don't really have a media. We don't have true intelligence gatherers. We have a group of people like Oprah and all these people that has media. You know, then we have the ignorant media, the so-called alternative, like Roland Martin and all these people who are not really profound people, not taking anything away from them. And then we have the total buffoon, like the Sarnettas and the Panics and the Black Dots and all these people there, and these religious people in New York. I'm just calling names that you get an idea of who I'm talking about. I'm not really talking down at anyone. I'm not really talking about anyone, but even the Black Power Awards, I mean, it's totally foolish. All they're doing is mimicking the Oscars and say we're going to give us a chance, but it's all a part of Soros and all these people that's controlling things. It's all a part of the Black Lives Matter, whether it's directly, whether they're getting a check directly from Soros, they're helping Soros indirectly. We must look to the great pyramids from which our help comes. We must look to the hills, the monuments from which our help comes. And if we go to the search engines, put in the search engines, the Holy Book of Wonder, it's our only salvation. And I hate to be talking about it on a religious level, but that's what it is. And when I say religion, I mean scientific. I don't mean rote religion as normal. I mean scientific, cultural facts and power. You are now in tune on the one, the force itself. At this time, we call the Holy Master Blaster Jack.